This is the EndNote discussion panel this morning. I'm going to start our time together with an acknowledgement of country, acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we live, work and learn. So for me, that's the Darkinjung people, but I'm sure we also have people here from Awabakal country, Biripi country, Worimi, Wonnarua and Eora country. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. So you've got 5 librarians here today that are going to have a bit of a conversation and tell you how we work with EndNote, how we work with our students, researchers, academics with EndNote. So you've got me, Fiona, you've got Nicole, Jenny, and 2 Ruths for the price of 1. And this is what to expect today. So we're going to share some of our top tips for using EndNote. So the way we've learned over our time and experience makes EndNote work the best, and how to avoid trouble, but also how to get out of trouble if things do go wrong. So some of the things we're going to cover are backing up your EndNote library and using the sync to use your EndNote library across multiple computers. We're going to talk about managing your library and personalising it. So creating really rich records and really consistent records, and also how to edit your output styles so that in the documents that you're creating and you're using Cite While You Write, everything is looking exactly as it needs to look. We're also going to talk about how to guard against corrupting your Word documents and how to recover Word documents that have gone awry, and also how to share your EndNote library with others if you're working collaboratively on research projects or documents together, and how to troubleshoot travelling libraries. I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about backup libraries. So as you use EndNote more, you're going to hopefully discover that EndNote is a really great tool for creating a personal database of all your references, and you can actually collect them all and organise them, and they'll be an enormous benefit for you over your studies and into your research journey to have all those references well organised there. But of course, whenever you've got something that's a really, really important resource to you, it is terrible if you lose it. So that's why having backup options is really important. There are 2 different ways you can back up your EndNote library. So one of them is to sort of make another copy and save it somewhere else. And the other way is to sync it to an online library and have it backed up in the cloud. So I want to tell you a little bit about both of those options. People will prefer to do one or the other, or even do both for extra security. So I'll just explain a little bit about the differences between the 2. So firstly, if you make a copy or a compressed library, then it's an exact copy of your EndNote library at the moment that you create it. So it won't update if you add more references later. And if this is your method of backing up EndNote, you'll have to work out kind of like a workflow in the way you work with EndNote. That means that you're regularly creating these backup copies. And so you'll need to make sure that you name them in such a way that you know what is your latest backup copy, or even name them the same thing so they're overwriting your old backup copies, so that you're not looking at millions of different EndNote libraries and trying to figure out which one's the current backup. The other thing is that you really need to save it somewhere different than where your working EndNote library is, because it's absolutely pointless to save it on the same computer, because if you lose that computer, you've lost your EndNote library and your backup as well. So you've got to maybe purchase an external hard drive or save it somewhere elsewhere so that it will be safe. If you use the online way of backing up, then it saves a copy of your EndNote library to the cloud, and it can be synced every time you open your EndNote library or even during sessions working on EndNote. So it means that it's an up-to-date copy at any time. And the other thing that this facilitates is sharing libraries with collaborators, but also if you're working on more than one computer. So perhaps you have a desktop computer in an office, and then you have a laptop that you take home, but you want to use the same EndNote library and you want it to be updated. EndNote Online allows you to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop sharing the slides and move to my EndNote library so I can show this in person. So here's a copy of my EndNote library open here. You can see I've got lots and lots of references. I've got different group sets and groups that I've put all sorts of different references in. I just want to show you how you can make those copies. So we go here, File. So the first option is Save a Copy. We click here and you can see that this is my current EndNote library I have open. It consists of two parts, a folder, a data folder, and then an EndNote file, and they have to be saved together for the EndNote library to work. So you can see that it's automatically named it with the same name as my library and then copy afterwards, and it's automatically sort of thought maybe I'd like to save it here in the same place, which is obviously a bad decision to save it in the same place. So I'm going to want to navigate elsewhere in my computer. Or perhaps I've got, as I said, an external hard drive plugged in, and then I'm going to need to decide whether just keeping the same name and copy is right for me, and then go ahead and click Save. I'm not going to do that now. Alternatively, you can choose a compressed library. So a compressed library puts together that data folder and the library file into one compressed file, which is smaller, like a smaller size file. And that just means it's easy to email, because some email clients only allow you to have attachments up to a certain size. And if you tried to email a copy of your EndNote library, it might not be able to be sent. Whereas a compressed library is small enough to email. So something that some people like to do regularly is to create a compressed library and email it to themselves. And that way they've always got a copy that they can download from their email and open if something goes wrong with their EndNote library. So you can see you can include your file attachment, so any PDFs you've got or not. It's up to you. You can create this file just as is, or you can create it and email it in the same step. And actually you can make this compressed library of all your references or just some of your references. So for instance, if you were working with a collaborator, and we're going to talk about this a bit later in the webinar, and you needed to send them some of your references, this is a way you could do it. So you could just select perhaps a certain group, say this is the group that I want to create a compressed library, and you could save that and email it to your collaborator so that then they can import that into their library. So again, I won't do this now. That's how you save copies. For online syncing, we're going to go to Edit and then Preferences. If you're on a Mac, you don't have an Edit menu, you have an EndNote menu that the preferences are under. So we'll open this and you can see that there's stacks of different preferences you can set, and we might look at a few of these today, but the one I'm looking at is sync, and you can see that I'm already syncing this library. So I've got my email address and password in here, and it's identified that this is the library that's syncing. So something I really should mention at this point is that you can only ever sync one EndNote library with your EndNote Online. Now that's usually fine because we do actually recommend that you only have one EndNote library and that you organise it using groups and so forth for different projects. But it's just worth mentioning that you can't sort of say, oh, I'm going to start from scratch and open a whole new EndNote library and sync that one because you can't sync multiple EndNote libraries to your online account. And this just gets filled in automatically by the program, so it identifies which library it's syncing. So if you're new to this, you'd click this button, Enable Sync, and then it would suggest that you either sign in to your EndNote account if you have one, or that you create one. I'm just going to close that and show you up here in the help. I can click here to get to my EndNote online. So it's just opened on my other screen. It's going to ask me to log in. And you can see that all my references that were in my desktop library are also here, and all these groups have been retained. The only thing that isn't retained is the group sets. So in my EndNote library, I've got a group set called Training, and then I've got all these groups underneath called Training Dash Medline, Training Dash Penguins, and so forth. And unfortunately, the online version doesn't retain the group sets. It just puts all the groups in alphabetical order. So that's why under my group set of training, I've actually started all my groups with the word training, because that means they all appear together. So that's just a little tip for naming your group sets. The other thing that you can do is, if I was on a brand new computer and I installed EndNote, I could create a new library, decide where to choose, where to save it, what to call it. And then once I had that new blank library opened, I could go ahead to my preferences that I showed you before, set up that sync. And then when I sync it, all my references will appear on my new blank library on my new machine, so that I can use it across the two. All right, I'm just going to go back to the slideshow. And I think we're ready for our next speaker.
Fiona, we've just had a question come in from Chris. How can I create groups for different subjects?
Great question. So let me just go back here. So for instance, you've got group set is kind of just a heading, and then groups are underneath. So depending on how you want to arrange it, you know, you can do it however you want, but let's just say I wanted a new group set. So I'm going to say create group set, and this is going to be called You On Study for all my studies that I'm doing here. Now, if I click here on You On Study, I can again go to groups, but this time create group, and I might call this You On Nurse 1001 for that first group. And then another course that I'm studying might be Nurse 1002, and so forth. And the great thing is that references can be added to more than one group. So if I decide a few of these references all belong in Nurse 1001, I can select them and drag them in here. But if it turns out that one or two of those are also used in Nurse 1002, I can drag them over into that as well, and they'll appear in both. You can rename your groups whenever you want. So if you change your mind about where it belongs, you can do that. Or if you even want to move it to a different spot. So if you say, oh, actually, this should be in this group set called training, you can just drag it up and put it in there. So the groups are really flexible and a really nice way of organising your library. Was there anything else?
Yeah, Chris would also like to know how to sync. Chris, do we have time to show that again, Fiona? Or would it, I think it might be a better idea if Chris was to make a time with one of us. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Just looking at the time and knowing that there's quite a few more things that we wanted to talk about today. We might just wait until the end and see if we've got time to cover it, or might need to be a book a librarian.
Alrighty, so it's my turn. So my name is Ruth Cameron. I'm one of the librarians here, and like everyone here, I've got a huge EndNote library, and a lot of my references come from corporate authors, so not necessarily a person, but an organisation. And for a while there, because I wasn't used to using EndNote, some of my corporate authors ended up looking like this. So instead of saying Australian Industry Group, it would have A.I.group, and if it was a reference list in APA 7th, it would turn out as group, A.I. which is not what you want at all. So Fiona, if you go to our next slide, we will show you how to fix it. All you have to do when you're manually entering, or if you go back in and you edit your reference entry, put comma at the end of the corporate author. So there's no space, you've just got the corporate author, and then bang in a comma, hit save, and that will fix the problem for you. And Jenny, I think I have to throw to you so that you could talk about more authors.
Yes, thanks, Ruth. So I guess the key to everything is consistency. If you're putting in authors, make sure you're putting them in the same way. Are you using their full name, or are you just using their initials? Because you can confuse EndNote a little bit, and we'll be covering some of this a little bit later. But as I said, instead of calling it Smith, Bob in one example, and then Smith, B, consider what you want to be calling that same author. So keep that consistency going. Probably use just the initials. Make sure that there's either a full stop or a space between each of the initials, so that EndNote can pick up what it is that you're trying to communicate with those names. Things like double barrel names, some nationalities such as people from the Netherlands, they quite often have a double barrel name, Van Gent or Van Gogh or something. When you're typing those in, that's fine to just have Van space Gogh, comma, and then their initial. The same with a hyphenated name, just type it as you see it, and EndNote will be able to recognise that. But it's the consistency that you want to make sure, if you've got that same author, make sure that you're putting that author's name in the same way, and also consider, am I going to be typing in their first name, or am I just going to be typing in the initials of their name? The other thing to be aware of, and we'll look at this again in a little bit time in the future. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Things don't come across from databases perfectly as well, so you may need to go in and edit the names of things. They may come across in capital letters or something, so keep an eye on every citation that comes into your EndNote library and adjust it straight away. It'll just save you a bit of time. So I'll hand back to Ruth.
So if we move on to our next slide, you'll see that this kind of relates back to what Jenny was just saying about what we call title cases. So if you're importing your references into EndNote from databases, some of them won't keep that style consistent, and APA 7 particularly likes to have the first letter of the title, first word of the title capitalized, and then the rest are in lowercase. And then if you have a subtitle for that article or book, it's a colon after the first title. And then when the subtitle comes in, the first word of that subtitle is also capitalized. Proper nouns are capitalized also. But sometimes when you're importing from databases, you'll find out that they actually capitalize every single word in the title, which is not what you want. So it's what Jenny was saying. Once you've imported your references, go back and just check to see that those title cases are actually consistent. So, you know, the first point on the slide is follow your reference style for that specific resource. So if you're looking at an electronic article, you can go and check to make sure that the format is correct. Don't rely on those automatic citation tools or the importing from databases. You are smarter than your computer. You are smarter than EndNote. So if you check, you can make sure that it's correct. And for example, I've got a link there to the APA 7 referencing style for journal articles. And Fiona, if you go to the next slide, I've just got a screenshot of that page. So you can see that we give you the format, and then underneath the format we've got some examples, and you can just see the capitalization in those examples on the slide. And that's all from me.
Thanks, Ruth. There's been a question that we can answer to do with authors, and Chris has asked, do we need to type the first name then the last name in the author column manually? So great question, Chris. You have to type the surname in first, the author's last name, comma, first name, and then you have a field for each of the separate authors. So that's Chris. And Krista has also asked a question that we could probably answer now as well. And it's to do with the notifications to get the most recent updates in EndNote 20. Is this the same one that we updated recently? So I think we've all seen that that pop-up come up. Do you want to update? What's the consensus on that one, do you think?
In order to update, you'll need to go onto Software Centre and download it, just like you would any other piece of software. So the latest version that's come out is 20.3. It's just an upgrade of 20.2. There's no urgency to do so, but it will have fixed any little bugs and things as we go. I noticed there was another question about symbols in authors' names. If you cut and paste the name of something that has a symbol in it, it will keep that symbol. So yeah, that's answering that one too.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about editing output styles. So EndNote does come preloaded with over 500 styles in the actual desktop version, but there are an additional 40,000 plus available on the EndNote website. So you can only edit the referencing style via the EndNote desktop program. But we think before you start to edit it, it is best to understand that reference style, how it should look versus how you want it to look, and then have a look at the templates that are in, where we'll have a look in a moment about where to go to edit the style. But be familiar with how that template works and what it indicates as spaces, what it indicates for certain things, so that you know you're editing the right section. And you can either save, once you edit a style, save it as a new name. It does make, there's two, you can save it as a new name, or if you know that you just want to use this one style and you're going to keep using it, you can overwrite what's there. I normally do save it as a new style, just so that I've always got that original version that came with the program sitting there as a backup in case I need to revert or change anything else. If you go to the next slide, Fiona. Thank you. So common things that we edit in output styles. We've got, if you're doing any publishing, sometimes specific journals will actually have a prescribed way to do it. And sometimes you can only get to that if you want to edit a style. But commonly here, we often edit the Vancouver style. that the one that comes preloaded in EndNote does not usually do the superscript option, and we can change the listing of the reference list to have all the line indents and looking at journal abbreviations. Now, I will just share my screen and show you how we do this. Okay, so when we talk about Vancouver, what we often see, I've just got my EndNote library open here. If I click on one, you get a little example down here of what it's going to look like in a reference list. And I have a Word document here as well. Now, I've chosen to insert Vancouver, so we can see here that it's inserted in here as number 1, and it's generating the reference list down the bottom here. But if I actually want this to be superscript for all of my references, and another common thing we mentioned is that I want all of this to be a hanging indent, so it's all indented here on the side. I'm going to come into EndNote, and we go to, before I do that, actually, apologies, I'll just show you. We said that in EndNote there is a lot of referencing styles, so you can see them from here, or we go select another style, and there's a huge list here. But when I also said that there's some extra ones available online, if you go to help and EndNote output styles, we will see that loads this page, and you can, if you've been told to publish in a specific journal, you can try typing that in. Alternatively, you just scroll down and there's a huge list here, and you can download these to add into your library as you need. Now back to our Vancouver. So another thing with Vancouver is you often want to have an abbreviation. So to see what these are, if I go to library and define term lists, and I click on journals, again, similar to the output styles, it does come with, EndNote does come with journal lists, term lists, and you can import them here, but as you'd want to, if you choose to do that, you'd want to delete what you've actually got already in here. But if you need to do things like that, maybe make a book a librarian or chat to one of us. So if we want our Vancouver to show the abbreviation, what we can see here on my screen is this is the name of the full name of the journal, and this column here that says abbreviation 1 on mine, oops, there's nothing in abbreviation 2, so we'll stick with abbreviation 1. That's going to tell me what it's going to do if I chose to move it to abbreviation 1 for these journals. So that's where I see what's going to happen here. Now if I close this, when we go to tools, output styles, and I currently want to edit Vancouver, and when I said earlier about looking at the templates, that's this page here. This gives you a bit of an author guidelines. You'll see here I'm going to go into, I want to currently edit the citation style, and so I go into the templates, and it's this section here that I want to say needs to be in the superscript. So if I highlight this and select the little A1, it's going to put this in superscript here. The other thing I wanted to do is look at changing the layout of our reference list. So if I just scroll down to bibliography and go to layout, right down the bottom here, it says hanging indent. And I want to say on all paragraphs, it needs to be a hanging indent. The next one is our journals. So we want to make sure that the abbreviation was coming across. So we want to click on journal names, which is right up the top here. And you can see here it's already saying it's going to bring in the abbreviation 1. So that's okay. Now I've made all those changes, so I just close this screen and it's going to ask if I want to save these changes, and yes I do. So it'll prompt me to actually save it as a new one, or if you just want to keep it, you can just say, if you just leave it as Vancouver, it overwrites. But I'm going to call this one Vancouver Superscript so that I know this is this superscript version, and say save. Okay, now to bring that into my referencing thing, I just click on where the referencing style was. If I go in to select another style, we'll see now in this list I have Vancouver Superscript. So I'm going to click this one and say choose. And you can see already in this preview it has made everything here be indented. Now if I come back here to my list, this is my Word document. We want to make sure this is on Vancouver Superscript as well. And as I change that, you can see it's automatically done it for. It's got the superscript 1 and everything's indented. So now when I choose to insert a citation for the rest of my writing, let's go to this one and insert. It's kept that superscript format for us, and it's put everything here as an indent and abbreviated this journal as well for me. Okay, I'll just stop my share because that is editing styles for you.
We have a question from Krista. When I close an article, having read it, EndNote asks whether I wish to save it, highlight it and comments. This takes me to EndNote as an option or another folder. I'm finding that it will not save if I choose the EndNote option. How can I do this? Krista, do you mean reading a PDF when you're in EndNote? You might need to make a time with me, Krista. I know Krista, she's one of my students.
I'm not sure if in this webinar format, if the participants can actually speak out loud, Jenny.
No, that's okay. She can answer in the chat. Yeah. Krista, make a time with me and we'll have a look at that one together.
All right, let me go back to our slideshow. Just bear with me for a moment, please. All right, so this is me again, just talking about working with Word. So I've got 2 slides, and one of them is kind of like how to do it right, so you don't have trouble with your Word document. And then my second slide is some tips for how to cope if things go wrong. And I'm going to demo with a couple of Word documents that I've already prepared. So first of all, we've already said that you should only have one EndNote library if possible, but definitely only use one EndNote library with your document. Don't open your document and open a completely different EndNote library and add some more citations from that one as well. That's a surefire way to end up with your Word document in a mess. Secondly, use the EndNote toolbar to make any changes to your citations or your reference list. It's best not to use track changes on your Word document because that tends to interfere with the code that's coming from EndNote. If you're going to make big changes in your document, convert it to unformatted citations before you do that, and that includes if you're combining different documents together. So for example, if you have different chapters of a thesis that you need to merge together. And lastly, if you've got collaborators that aren't working with the same EndNote library with you, or perhaps don't have EndNote at all and might tend to make edits to your document, it's better to send them a plain text version. So I'm just going to get out of the slideshow and open my Word document to show you what I'm talking about. So this is a document that I've already started. In fact, I'm going to just make it a little bit bigger, I think, so we can see it. So this is just some text that has been automatically written by Microsoft. You can ignore that. And you can see that I've added some citations already, and you can see that there's a reference list, and everything's looking all right so far, except for this reference, which looks very weird. You can see that it was looking all right, and then all of a sudden it's got these square brackets, and this is all a bit strange. So the first thing I want to point out is that if you've got anything that looks wrong in your reference list, then the place to edit that is in EndNote. Don't start trying to edit it in your Word document. Fix it in the source, and then it will be right in every document that you use. So this is a paper by Morris from 2015. So I'm just going to open my EndNote library, and I'm just going to use the search functionality to find the reference that is the problem. So it's this one here. I'm going to click edit so I can have a look and see what's going wrong. Now, of course, I'm experienced at using this, so I sort of know what I'm looking for ahead of time. But, you know, have a little look down, and I can see that the bit that was in square brackets here was this type of article: historical article, research support, non-US government review. And it's all sort of been entered down onto different lines, which was why the format of it looked so odd. But we actually don't want this in it anyway. This is the type of article which EndNote in its APA 7 style, which I'm using, is displaying that type of article, which we don't need it to do. So you've got a couple of choices here. One is to edit your style, like Nicole just showed you. So go in, edit your APA 7 style, look in the templates for the bibliography, and find the journal article, and you'll see that it has a section where it says it's putting the type of article in square brackets, and just delete that out so that it's not going to happen. Or for the purposes of this example, I'm just going to delete that from there and save it. And so now when I go back to my Word document and I click in my EndNote 20 toolbar, update citations and bibliography, you can see that's been fixed now and it looks beautiful. So definitely always fix things in EndNote. If you notice there's mistakes, don't try and fix it in your document. The other thing is you might want to make changes to your references. So for instance, you might say, oh, actually, I didn't really want to cite this person here at all. That was a mistake. I've cited that article here and I don't need it here at all. Don't just try and backspace or delete. Use your EndNote toolbar. So if we go to edit and manage citations, you can see it gives us a list of all the citations that are in the Word document and what EndNote library they've come from. And the one that we've clicked on is highlighted. But if we hadn't clicked on any, they just would have all been listed here when we click edit and manage citation. And so this one we actually want to remove. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that and click OK. And it's removed it. It's still going to be in the reference list though, because I'd already cited it somewhere else. But if I hadn't, it would have also removed it from the reference list. Another thing that you might commonly want to do is add a page number if you've made a direct quote. So let's just imagine that this here is a direct quote and we need to say what page number it was on. Again, don't try and just type in here P.7 or whatever page it is. Use your edit and manage citations. And again, it's highlighted the one that I'd clicked in, and I'm just going to say that it was page 7 that I wanted, and you can see that it's updated it here. Another thing you might want to do is you might have said something like, as RAL demonstrated or whatever. So you may have already referred to the author and so not need the author's name in this citation, just need the year. So again, edit and manage citations. And instead of having this one in the default display, I'm going to exclude the author and click OK. Now, I'm very aware that my examples have been very APA 7 centric. It's an author date style. These are the type of issues that people using author date styles are going to use. So I'm aware that you might not be using this sort of style and there might be other changes that you need to do, but I do recommend that you always use this toolbar to make any changes to your citations that you need to do. Same thing with your reference list. If you decide you need a different font, you need it to be double spaced, you need a different heading, you know, anything that you need with your reference list, don't just jump in here and try to do it, but use the bibliography section and you can change the title, you can change the spacing, you can change the font or size. So for instance, if we say we're going to have a single space after each entry and we want to call this reference list instead of references, we can make those changes there and it updates them for us. Another thing I mentioned is that if you're doing a lot of cutting and pasting and so forth, unformatted citations is a good mode to work in. So I'll just show you what that looks like. It's just in this convert here. So if I say convert to unformatted citations, you can see that they change the look of the in-text citations, those curly brackets come in, and my reference list actually disappears altogether. So now if I want to move this whole paragraph down to the bottom, or if I decide actually I want to delete this reference altogether, I can quite safely without damaging my Word document. And when I'm in this format, I can actually add new citations as well if I want to. So I can still go ahead and say, right, I actually wanted to add this citation, and you can see that it will put it in there for me. And then when I'm ready to see what it looks like, I can click Update Citations and Bibliography, and it goes ahead and fixes up all my citations and my reference list. The last thing is I mentioned the plain text version. So if you did want to send a version that wasn't connected to EndNote at all, that didn't have any of the EndNote code in it to a collaborator so that then they could make comments, changes and so forth without breaking your document, then you do it here. And you'll get a message that will remind you that you need to save the version you've got that's connected to EndNote first, because this is going to create a new document. It's going to remove all the EndNote code and there's no going back from this one. So I find that because I normally save my documents in OneDrive and they have automatic saving, this creates a problem if I want to create a plain text version, because it will just create the plain text version over my old EndNote version and I will have lost it. So it's really important, if you are going to make a plain text version, that you go ahead and save the one that's connected to EndNote somewhere on your hard drive that's not auto saving in OneDrive or any other cloud place, and then name this new one something saying plain text or whatever, so that you know which one is different. Now, I do also have another document to show you that is a real dog's breakfast, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to go back to our slideshow and just talk a little bit about what I could have showed you, and just encourage you to make an appointment with a librarian if you've got a Word document that's a bit of a disaster. So some things you can do if your Word document looks a mess. So firstly, you can just test, like open a new Word document, try adding some citations from EndNote and make sure that's working properly. So it's not a bigger problem than just that one Word document. But if that's all working properly, then the next thing I would do is check which EndNote library you've got that's connected to this document, and whether all the citations, like all the references you've cited, are actually in that EndNote library or not. Because if you've accidentally opened two different libraries, or if you've sent it to a collaborator and they've added some references from their library, that's where you can get problems. So the best way to solve that is to actually add all the references that you require into your one library. The other thing is to get rid of any of your markup or track changes, comments and that sort of thing, because they can often damage a document. And converting to unformatted and then updating again is a really good way of fixing it too, because if it can't find all the references in your document, it will alert you. It will say, oh, I can't find this one. And you'll know which ones are missing and that you need to add. If worse comes to worse and it's completely, you know, a disaster, I will sometimes convert to unformatted citations, select all the text, copy it into a brand new Word document, and then update citations on that brand new Word document. So I think that we're ready for other Ruth. Is that right?
Thanks, Fiona. Yes, so I'm going to talk about personalising your library. And you probably already know that EndNote is a great way of managing resources. It's not about having citing things in a document as much as managing your own library of resources and organised in the way that makes things work for you best. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to demonstrate in my section. I'm going to talk about editing your preferences and the kinds of things that you should look for. I'm going to talk about adding and removing columns in your display so you can see them. We've already talked about groups, group sets. I might quickly talk about smart groups. Syncing your EndNote library is a really good way to maintain a version of your library out there in the ether, because you can't keep it on OneDrive or any of those kind of cloud systems, because what happens is the record numbers get moved by that system, by that cloud network. So the place to keep an online version and have that backup is on EndNote Online. Quality controlling your records. I think we've had a few comments about that, but I'll just show that very briefly. I'll show you how to add something like a label or a database name to a whole group of records. I'll look at attached PDF. So Krista mentioned something about making notes in your PDF and then it asks you to save it. That's something that well, I've never had a problem with it, so I'll show you how that's done, and considering labels, because when you're working with collaborators, tagging your resources so that everybody knows what those resources are associated with is a really good way to organize things. So I'm going to share my library now and show you some of those things. I've got the right one. Okay, so this is my EndNote library. You can see I've only got 33 references because I trim mine regularly so that I can demonstrate things. The first one I want to show you is preferences. So Fiona already mentioned that if you go edit preferences, or on a Mac, it's EndNote preferences. And she showed you how to set up your sync. So where you put in your, you enable sync and make sure that you can keep EndNote Online updating your record automatically if you like. You'll notice here that I've got an EndNote library that's on my computer and not on OneDrive. On OneDrive, it can be corrupted. It won't get corrupted every day, but it will eventually get corrupted because those record numbers get changed. So one of the first things I suggest to people when they're talking about preferences is libraries. So the default for the libraries preference is is to open the most recently used library. This is the most common problem I have find people coming to us with, is that they've got 20 different libraries. And that's because they've got this default open most recently used library. They've saved a backup of their library, maybe somewhere else, and it's looking for that one all the time. So it keeps making a new one whenever you open your library. So I always get it to open specifies a library, and then so you choose the library that you're using and add open library. So that means it always looks for this one EndNote library. And if I make a backup, it's not looking for that. It's sitting somewhere else. It's an archive. It's not an active library. This is my working library. So I think that's the most important one to point out. The other ones that you can alter are things like duplicates. So if you're asking your EndNote library to find duplicates, it will automatically be looking for author, year and title, but sometimes you want to alter that, what it's looking for to find the duplicates. So you can alter that there. The other things that you might like to look for are find full text. So on our EndNote guide, you'll find the text that goes with our easy proxy. And that means that it will be searching Web of Science, the DOI and PubMed platforms to try and find the full text and connect them on EndNote. So this is something that you might like to set up on your EndNote library. And the last one I like to point out to people is PDF handling. So whenever you do attach a PDF, it automatically doesn't rename. So you can have your PDFs called out or document 1 or a bunch of letters, numbers. I like it to be author year because it's succinct and it's quite clear which item I'm looking at. So author year is what I usually change mine to. There's lots of things here that you could alter, but they're the ones that I tend to point people to when they're working on things. The other one that I'm going to talk about now is columns. So they're fields. Why isn't that not changing? My EndNote library is doing something. It's probably updating. It does a little slow thing when it's updating. So I'll just open it again. You'll notice when I click EndNote, it automatically opens my EndNote library because that's the one that I have got it automatically opening. I think it was backing up on me, doing its sync. So the other things that I like to point out to people are these columns. So I can add or remove columns. I can sort them. So I can say I'd like reference type to sit here in front of year if I like. I can add record number so I can see which actual record number is associated with things. And anytime I want to remove one, I can just right click and decide which things I don't show. So it's a very easy way of altering how my EndNote library looks. When I've got my item selected, I can see I've got a summary, I've got edit, and I've got PDF as 3 options here. So one of the things that I suggest people do is use their PDFs, put PDF notes in. So we mentioned this before, this bit of text, I'd like to add a note. So I just click it, add my note. Oops, so it's not doing it for me. Add my note. I'm going to put the word exercise in here. And I can then make this a searchable field. So I can go through this whole Word document, put these notes in, and then I can say, I would like to find all the PDFs that I've added these words to. So it can be the kind of language that you want to use. So in order to save that, I just close it. It says, do you want to save this? And I just say yes. And it just goes into my PDF. So when I look back at it, you can see I have a note there. So it's automatically doing that. The other thing I like people to do is think about labels. So if I look at this item and I look at my edit, you can see I have a label of children on this one. And I can add a label. I'll just put another one of children. And I can save those labels. So this is like tagging things to say which ones are useful for this particular topic. It's very handy when you've got a research group and you're all trying to tag things in the same way. So if I then use my advanced search options, I'll just go back to all references. Here I've got options like, I'd like to search my PDF notes, all 33. I'd like to find which ones I've put the word exercise into a PDF note. And I've put it into 3 of them. I could also say, which ones would I like to, I'll go back to them. Which ones have I got the label of children on? And search. So those words don't have to be anywhere in the PDF or in the notes. I've just added that label and made that own tag for myself. So it's a really handy way to manage things. With the groups that I've got here, for example, I've got one here called Chapter 3. So that's a group that I've decided they're going to go into my Chapter 3. And if I would like to add a label automatically to everything in that chapter, I can go to my tools, my library, go change, move, copy fields, and I can tell it that I would like to have the label. I'm going to assert it after the fields and text of Chapter 3. So instead of using groups to organize things, I can be using a label field in all of these items. And now it's going to add that to 11 different items. So if I look at this one, I can see Chapter 3 is in my labels. So it's a really handy way to organize things.
Ruth, I can see we've only got 1 minute left.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not you. I'm sure it was me talking far too much. Is there anything that you just want to wrap up on?
Let's have a quick look at saving a library or a group, which is the next slide. I'm just going to quickly show you in the visual here that when a group is shared, it has this little double head on it. If I want to share this group with other people, I can just right click on it and say share group. And then the people that I want to share it with, I just have to add their email addresses and then I share that group. The thing about that one is it doesn't share the PDFs. So if there were PDFs attached to this group, they wouldn't come across. If I want to share my whole library, I go File. I can either open somebody else's shared library or I can share my library. And that is, oops, I missed my share there, share. So I can share it and then I just put those PDFs in. Sorry, then I get to share those PDFs. So I'm going to stop share. So I can look at somebody's shared library there.
Right, I'm just launching a poll so that we can get some feedback from everyone that's attended, which we'd really appreciate. Now, as you can see, we know lots of stuff, us librarians. We love our EndNote. We like playing around in it. We've worked out lots of fun ways to use it and to make it more effective for us. So please do get in contact and make an appointment. If you're an HDR student or a researcher or a staff, you can contact your research librarian directly. If you're an undergraduate or a postgraduate by coursework, you can use the Book a Librarian link on the website. And I'm hoping maybe one of my colleagues might put that in the chat. Thanks, Jenny. I can see you're nodding. And then you'll be paired up with a librarian that can help you one-on-one to sort out any EndNote problems that you have. We want you to make the best use of this tool. We've, paid for a subscription to it. It's a really powerful tool. We want you to use it well, enjoy using it, and use it effectively. So, yeah, I want to just say thank you to my lovely panel, Ruth, Jenny and Nicole. And I'm sure if I hadn't have talked as much, they would have had time to say more. So I think we just maybe were a little over ambitious with how much stuff we could get through that we wanted to show you. But yeah, we've really enjoyed this session and would really like to meet you again later if you need more help. Thank you.